Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. So glad you are joining us. We are looking at the 5 enemies that are always going to be encountered on the journey to success. We've been looking at the first enemy, which was the enemy above, that was in King David's life, which was the Saul. We always seem to have a Saul in our life, that leader, that authority figure of some kind who is maybe insecure, threatened by our success, maybe trying to be a lid, maybe they're passive aggressive, but we all encounter this along the way in our life. And we saw 3 things that David did that were actually right, 3 responses that were right. We saw first that he processed up with God. Secondly, we saw that he processed up with a spiritual leader, and then he went to Samuel. So then third, we see that he processed with a covenant friend. Now, we often find that the greatest threat to today's success was yesterday's success, because even though David did 3 things right, he begins a spiral downward by following 3 successes with 3 failures. And we're going to learn from these, from David, really what not to do when we encounter enemies inside of our life. So we read in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 2, "So David said to Ahimelech the priest, 'The king has ordered me on some business and said to me, do not let anyone know anything about the business on which I'm sending you or what I have commanded you, and I have directed my young men to such and such a place.'" So let me give you the context of this verse. David is running now from Saul. He comes to a small city that's about 3 miles north of Jerusalem called Nod. And it was a city of priests, and the tabernacle was there. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't yet there, but yet the tabernacle was there. And so it looks like a safe place to go. It looks like running to God's house would be a right step. But what David did is he told a big lie to Ahimelech. And so David uses a lie to protect himself from the threat of the king. Why he lied, we're not exactly sure. We could maybe go, well, maybe David was just trying to protect Ahimelech. Maybe he was just afraid he would be sold out. We don't know why exactly he lied, but we do know that there was no justification for this lie. And so we see 3 problems that begin to happen when we use lies to protect ourselves from our enemies in any way. So 3 things. Number 1, what you keep in the dark ultimately will keep you in the dark. I'm going to say that again. What you keep in the dark ultimately keeps you in the dark. Let me give you the context to this concept. John chapter 8 and verse 44, Jesus is rebuking a group of the Pharisees, and he says, "You are of the father, your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it." Now, Jesus said a lot of direct things. He actually probably wasn't the most attractional motivational speaker saying you're a winner, because at times Jesus just called it like it was, because the Bible says speak the truth in love. So he's telling the Pharisees, look, he goes, you're speaking of your father, the devil, because the devil is a liar. And when you tell lies, you're actually using a tool that Satan uses to bring people into bondage. You can't use a tool from hell thinking it's going to produce heaven inside of your life. I'm going to say that again. You can't use a tool from hell thinking it's going to produce heaven inside of your life. When we tell a lie, for whatever reason, we're actually inside of Satan's territory, because he is the father of lies, and everything that he does is inside of darkness. So you'll never feel light. You're never going to see the way out when you're walking in darkness by using the tools of darkness, thinking it's going to deliver you. In fact, really, it does the opposite. In John chapter 8 and verse 32, Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." So if it's the truth that makes us free, in any given situation, when you tell the truth, it actually makes you free. When we tell a lie, which is the opposite of a truth, it will cause us to be in bondage. It will bring us into darkness. So it really has the counter result of whatever we're hoping to intend. We tell a lie because we want to be free. We don't want to get caught. But when we tell a lie, it's actually what's getting us caught further into the problem. Number 2, a lie creates a greater problem or a bigger problem than the one it just solved. So we'll tell a lie, even a little white lie, to solve one problem, only it creates a bigger problem that we continually have to feed. You see this inside of corporate America, Enrons, and then you got your Bernie Madoffs, Madoff with your money, and the list could just go on of leaders and of corporations who have told lies to stakeholders, shareholders, media, and at some point, the truth always comes out and it always backfires and it always creates a far greater problem. So it could look like David gets away with this lie. He leaves this city. He leaves with some resources, which we'll talk about in a minute. Only there's a man there that overhears this, and his name is Doeg. And he's going to be one of the 5 enemies we talk about in a future lesson. But Doeg later tells King Saul about this situation, and because David lied, it put Ahimelech in a situation that infuriated Saul, and Saul had 85 of the priests and of their families put to death by the sword, and David was responsible for it because it all began with a lie. When we think about David and his failures, usually it's just David had committed an affair with Bathsheba. He killed Bathsheba's husband, Uriah. And that's the one sin that we tend to think David committed. And there are some others that we're going to see inside the life of David that are lessons for us. And this seemingly white lie, this little innocent lie that he told to protect himself, cost the death of 85 innocent priests and family members. The spiritual walkaway lesson for us is this, that when we lie, it causes the death of things. It causes the death of relationships. Many marriages have dissolved over time because of accumulation of lies. When we live lies as leaders, ultimately it's the death of trust because the truth eventually does come out. And that's the third thing we see is a lie always catches up with us eventually. When we look at Abraham, another great leader inside of the Bible, he made the mistake during a time of famine. He went down to Egypt. We never see God telling him to go to Egypt. We see God telling him to go to the land of promise, the land that he would be given later. But in a crisis, he goes to Egypt, which is a picture of the world, and he tells a lie there because his wife is beautiful, and he knows that Pharaoh is going to get word of his beautiful wife, and that chances are he would be killed, and they would take his wife to be part of Pharaoh's harem. So he tells a lie, and he asks his wife to participate in the lie, and that is just say that you're my sister. So God plagues Pharaoh's house because he does take Abraham's wife into his harem, and he doesn't touch her. God plagues Pharaoh, and he realizes what happened, and then he rebukes Abraham and says, hey, man, you lied to me. And so he said this. He goes, well, I told you the truth. She's my half-sister, and technically they were related, and I guess it was a different time and era and before Arkansas and other things. But anyway, so it was a different time and era. So he told a half-truth. But remember this, a half-truth is still a full lie, and this half-truth caused significant problems for Abraham. Because when he left, he was given a bunch of cattle and silver and gold and some servants. And so Abraham probably thought, hey, it actually worked out pretty good. But inside of that, there was a woman named Hagar. And eventually Hagar became the mother of Ishmael. And it just created a ton of problems. We're not going to get into that. But anytime we think we got away with a lie, just know we just picked up a Hagar. That's ultimately going to become an Ishmael situation inside of our life. Numbers 32:23 says, be sure your sin will find you out. It's not God punishing you. It's not God chasing you down. It's your sin that will chase you down and hunt you down. So let me just walk this out practically, okay? So what does this practically look like? Because everybody listening to this goes, hey, this is a great message for my friend. This is a great message for so-and-so. But let's just apply this to our life before we go ahead and apply it to somebody else. Practical things. Hey, your boss says, hey, how are you doing? I'm great. I'm good. Okay. Is that a lie? Is it a half-truth? Because chances are, and I know this by experience, there are many times I will go to a staff member, hey man, how you doing right now? Oh, I'm good. When really they're drowning. They're drowning under work. They can't get it done. The stress of their job is coming home. It's impacting their family, and they're drowning. And so by not being honest with your boss, your leader, your manager about where you're really at inside of your job, your workload, what you're dealing with, whether at work, whether at home, you're creating bigger problems than what you're solving. And so just be honest. There are times you just go, hey, can I be honest about my workload? Can I be honest about some deadlines? I'm not going to hit those. If you'll just communicate with your boss and be honest, it allows them to come in and help you with that situation. So here's what often happens, and I've seen this pattern in staff. They aren't honest about their workload. They get overwhelmed. They get discouraged, and now they call in sick. Oh, I can't make it today. I'm sick. Well, really, you're just using another lie to cover for the previous lie and the problem that created. And you're sick. You're just sick of work. You're sick of failure. You're sick of being buried under a bunch of stuff because you weren't honest the first time. So then that just creates bigger problems because now you're missing a bunch of work and you aren't honest with your boss. Now you're losing trust and credibility, which leadership is the pace of trust. You're just creating bigger problems. The ball starts to drop. Then that same person will often lie about the ball being dropped because now they start shifting blame. Well, the ball dropped because of this department. The ball dropped because of that person. Or they just live in denial that there was a ball dropped at all. And ultimately, many staff end up finding new opportunities because they just don't understand the power of honesty and the power of a truth. So just remember, telling a half-truth to others to make yourself look good as well is also living in the land of a lie. See, there's this man named Doeg, and he later tells King Saul some of the facts, but he leaves out some information. So a half-truth is still a full lie. And what he used was someone else's situation to make himself look better to the king. And we're going to talk about that in a future lesson. But it's not just lying about yourself, but it's about how do you put other colleagues, other staff, other people in light with leadership, because a lot of times people are bearing false witness, meaning you're giving the right information for the wrong implication to make someone else look bad so you look good. And again, ultimately, many people get hurt when we do that. All right, we're going to pick up in the next lesson on the second mistake that David does, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.